Hello, this is Pastor Manny bringing to you the 16th in our series For Such a Time, Episodes in Esther. If you're just joining this series or just picked up the podcast, this first of the series was episode number 158, published on November 17th of 2020. Today's segment is entitled The Expectation of the Wicked Foiled. Remember, letters had been sent out, which are decrees, and they'd been sent out by Haman, the wicked man who hated the Jews. He's called the Jews' enemy in the Bible. And he had been given the king's ring so that the letters he sent out had royal authority. And these letters said that everywhere where there were Jews throughout the provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, 127 provinces, over 2 million square miles of kingdom. He said wherever this is sent out, that people could just do whatever they wanted to the Jews. They could abuse them, they could murder them, they could do whatever they wanted to, men, women, and children. And then they could steal their property, loot their stores, and take whatever they wanted there. It is, as I taught in earlier episodes, exactly what happened in 1938 under the Nazis, whose proper name in history are the National Socialist Democrat Party. But the Nazis, they did this in something that was remembered as Crystal Night, or the Night of the Broken Glass. And this exact thing happened. Synagogues were burned. Jewish people were dragged out in the street and beat, abused in every way. And their homes were looted, and some of them were executed, while the authorities, as it were, Hitler's brown shirts, they looked on or helped with the destruction. Well, that wasn't a new thing. This is exactly what was getting ready to happen in the kingdom of Ahasuerus. And these letters have been sent out. Well, after the letters were sent out, it was discovered what had happened and brought to the king's attention. You have to catch the other episodes to get all the details on that if you're not familiar with them. But what ended up happening, the man who put this in place, Haman, was actually hanged on a gallows that he had built, as gallows will be referred to again here, that he had built in order to kill a very good and great man by the name of Mordecai. Well, God brought that around so that Haman was hanged on his own gallows. But the problem was that these laws were still out there, still in effect. This was still going to happen on the appointed day, and it could not be retracted because the way that kingdom was set up, that once an edict went out, it could not be changed even by the king. So, when Mordecai came to power and Queen Esther, and God had done his great work in this thing, the king said, I can't undo the law, but I can let you all put out another law. And so they did. And what that law said was that the Jews were able to organize, defend themselves, and that they could expect help. Instead of adversity, they should expect help from the authorities. In other words, the authorities would be on their side, or would be at least in favor of what was going on. And so the Jews were allowed to defend themselves. They were allowed to organize. They were allowed to do this. And in addition to that, they said, if someone's trying to destroy you, you can fight back, and you destroy them, then you can take what is theirs. And so that's the scenario we're going into, very much a time of serious civil unrest. And so Esther chapter 9 begins with this and what was happening. And so let's see what happened to the expectation of the wicked. There's all kinds of people who've been looking at these Jewish stores, looking at Jews who owned a lot of things, looking at these people, looking at them saying, oh, they're different than we are. We're going to get to just do whatever we want to them. They're looking forward to that. But God turns the table on that wickedness. We begin in chapter 9, verse 1. It says, now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, and the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. Got to turn that thing around. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. Now, watch what they did. They didn't just go on a wild campaign of destroying people and saying, you don't understand. We're a minority in this kingdom and we're being treated badly, so we're going to destroy everything. No, what they do is completely different than that. What they do is they specifically go against those who were going to destroy them. It's the same thing. A Christian man, if he were to go out on the street and harm somebody or shoot somebody or something and just come out at somebody, that would be very wrong, very wicked. But if that same Christian man is in his home at night and someone comes breaking through the door, comes sneaking in through a window and invades the house, then that man is justified before God in doing whatever he needs to do to stop that person and defend his family. And by the way, in that type of scenario where you don't have time to find out whether they're armed or not, the first step needs to be a very substantial and final step. But a man's justified in that. And that's exactly what the Jews are doing. They're defending themselves and their families. They're not going out looking for people to hurt. And so it says, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. So God gave them a power. And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and the deputies and the officers of the king helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. They realized Mordecai was a Jew, and now he's second in command in the kingdom. And so they're like, we don't want to be known as helping people who were trying to destroy the Jews. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. He kept getting stronger and stronger. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. So it wasn't just somebody had ill will, I don't like you. Their hatred was being shown in the fact these people were plotting, were planning, and were coming at them to try to destroy them. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. This thing of this anti-Semitism, this let's destroy the Jews, let's execute and exterminate a whole race of people, apparently had a strong hold in the palace. 500 men were destroyed just there. And Farshandatha and Daphon and Asphtha and Portha, how do you like these names? And Deliah and Aridatha and Parmashata and Arasai and Nerodai and Vereshazatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. Now watch this. These 10 sons of Haman were as wicked as Haman was. They all get executed in this battle that goes on. And the Jews have been given legal permission, once they execute somebody, once they overcome their enemy, to take whatever they want, just like they would in warfare. But you'll find here in another place, the Jews did not take anything. They didn't plunder, they didn't go, they didn't loot, they didn't do any of that. They simply stood their ground. They simply did not allow themselves to be destroyed. And when that was done and what was necessary was done, they were finished. They didn't go further. They didn't plunder. They didn't loot. They didn't riot. It says on that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? So he asked Esther, what else needs done? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. In other words, they're already dead, but they're going to hang them up there so the people realize you don't ever want to go down this trail. And the king commanded it so to be done, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Now, there was an extra day of this kind of battle allowed in Shushan the palace, and all that apparently can point out is that there was a great influence of anti-Jew, anti-God's people influence there in that area in the palace, in the seat of authority. And so Esther said, we need an extra day to get rid of all this, to make sure it doesn't crop up again. And so that was granted to him. Verse 15, it says, for the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. So a total of 800 in 2 days. But on the prey, they laid not their hand. In other words, once again, they did not follow through and take any of the possessions. They weren't trying to overcome these people. They weren't trying to attack these people. They weren't trying to get riches to themselves. Now, they were just defending themselves as they had to do. The people they were defending themselves against were not people you could sit down and reason with. Back to the scenario I gave earlier. If myself or any other Christian man, if you're at night in the house and you hear a crashing and someone's coming into your house, you don't have time to sit and negotiate with them. You take action first and eliminate the threat. And that's exactly what they had to do here. Verse 16, but the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives and had rest from their enemies and slew of their foes 70 and 5,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. So neither the Jews in Shushan nor throughout the whole kingdom, these people, you would think of some of these provinces even as different countries, although it was one kingdom, different languages and everything. All of them had one thing in common. They did not go in and spoil afterwards. But 75,000 people lost their lives trying to destroy the Jews there in the kingdom. On the 13th day of the month, Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same, they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. Well, I appreciate you joining us today on the podcast. And tomorrow, not tomorrow, but in the next publication of the podcast, we will have the final episode of this series for such a time, Episodes in Esther. And I hope that you'll be there for that. It is the episode entitled Purim Established. Purim, Purim. That's a holiday which is celebrated by Jewish people to this very day. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, and we'll see how it was established in the Bible so many centuries ago. God bless you, and have a great day.